Hi everyone, this is Jed Shlackman. I'm a holistic counselor and spiritual energy healer. For this video, I want to speak about how our childhood culture and environment, as those interact with our own consciousness, shape our personality and identity. As we go through our human life, we are growing up in a family, in a school environment, in a particular country or culture. We're exposed to different forms of media. So there's many different things that we're interacting with that in some way could influence or shape the way our personality develops, the way our values, our priorities and interests form as we go through our life. So it's useful to reflect upon that, to look at things in our own life path, to see how we may have attached to or resonated with particular influences or values that were presented or shown in our environment. In some cases, seeing how we might have rejected or rebelled against some of those influences that were around us. We can observe some common examples in our life and in our society. You'll often see families where the children grow up to be in the same religion or spiritual path as their parents, where they may follow the same career path, where they may repeat certain patterns in relationships with marriages and divorces, etc. So those are some ways we can see where the family or culture is having an influence on the child. The child embraces those influences and in some way believes in following those in the person's own life and kind of emulating what has been presented to them, embracing a particular value or life path. So we all do that to some extent. When we're children, we usually will look up to our parents and embrace their values, some of their interests. Sometimes we choose to follow in their career path, to really be loyal to the values that our parents taught to us. There are cases or situations where the opposite can occur, where a child may in some way resent and rebel against a parent, where they don't relate to or identify with the values that the parents have modeled. So we do have our own kind of inner compass, our own sort of baseline way of being. You could look at as archetypal qualities, as aspects of the soul personality that are being expressed here as we go through our human life. So those in some way are also shaping our development as a human being, as our personality and identity form and evolve. So it's not only the environment, it's also what some people call nature. There's the idea of nature versus nurture. So nature could reflect what you consider genetic patterns. So if we're born with certain patterns of consciousness that have been carried in or inherited in a sense from our parents and ancestors, those could be a form of influence. But there's also influence from the soul level. So you might have developed certain qualities or attitudes in other lifetimes as a soul, and those may in some way be infused into the current incarnation, and so they'll in some way shine through even if you are in an environment that's somewhat different or contrasting to your soul personality in a sense. We can consider that when we're a child, we will be exposed to certain attitudes about what's good or bad, what's right or wrong, what roles in society are looked up to or looked down upon. So your culture presents those influences, and that can shape the way you go forward in your life. Especially in the modern era, there's media influences, so it could be things that we read, books or magazines, it could be websites, it could be online video content, it could be movies, TV shows, music that we're exposed to. There's many different forms of media and influences in that domain now, different things that children are drawn to. And of course, in our modern culture, children are exposed to a high volume of that content, more so than ever before. And that takes up a big chunk of this pie of influence, in a sense. If you were to cut a pie up into different pieces and see how much each of those are having an influence, well, you have the family environment, the parents, and then you have the school environment, you have teachers and peers, and then you have this media environment. So TV shows, movies, music, internet content, and there's another one that's kind of slipping my mind at the moment that I wanted to bring up in terms of media, because really everything around us is some form of media. So there's books, video games, that's the other one. So children nowadays are spending a lot of time playing video games, and there's even virtual reality type games that are becoming kind of the newest passion or fad, in a sense, for some young people. So all of that's there to kind of absorb your attention, to appeal to you in some way. So we can reflect on what those influences might have been when we were children. What were our parents' values? How did they live their life? What were their ways of modeling things to us, whether it was in their relationships, in their career or vocation, in their religion or spiritual or philosophical beliefs? How did they spend their time? What social activities were they participating in? What recreational drugs were they using, or pharmaceutical drugs were they using? Those could all be influences. And then, of course, the media part that I mentioned. So as a child, what video games were you playing? Were they very violent video games? Were they sports games? And what type of videos might you be viewing online, on YouTube or other types of websites? There's also television shows. Did you watch a lot of cartoons as a child? Did you watch Sesame Street or educational television programs? Did you watch science or history shows? Did you watch dramas, sports, violent, scary type movies? What were the things that appealed to you or that you were exposed to a lot? Music also. There's many different genres of music, different styles, and different ways those could affect our consciousness. It's kind of endless, the things that could be around us in our environment that could have some influence. I could use an example from the time I was a child. In my home environment, we didn't really watch much of the common, like, cartoon type content. Most of the shows are more educational that our parents introduced my siblings and I to. And also, as a child, we were encouraged to read a lot and be very focused on academic success. Some of the types of books I was reading as a child were things that reinforced the idea of being smart, of using your mind a lot, of developing intellectual forms of intelligence or analytical skills. So as a young child, elementary age, I was reading books like Encyclopedia Brown, The Great Brain, later things like Sherlock Holmes, Agatha Christie novels, also science fiction like A Wrinkle in Time and Madeleine L'Engle's other books. So those were the types of content that drew my interest, that kind of drove my way of thinking in some manner at that point in my life, to value intellectual capacity or the idea of being intelligent, of using the mind. When we look upon these early influences in our life, we can see how things evolve over time. So if you're a child who has, let's suppose, a family that are very oriented towards sports, so let's say someone has parents who are professional athletes or even who are currently coaching sports, the child might place a lot of value in those activities and spend a lot of time in youth sports activities. And if they have skill and athletic ability and develop that, they might go on to college and play in the sports teams there and maybe make it to a professional status as an athlete. So the influences around us very often do kind of set the stage for where we're headed later in life. But of course, as individuals, we always have this power to shift our focus or our path at any point in time. So things are always evolving. It's not so deterministic. Just because things have kind of molded your life in a particular direction doesn't mean you could make a major shift or turn at a certain point. Our environment often will change at certain times in our life. So we might be in a certain town or city and maybe our family moves and we go to schools with different cultures, different types of students there. So many different things could happen to change the environment or culture, and that could create some shift in the way we see ourselves, the way we feel about our environment and our life. So it's often very fascinating to kind of look at your own autobiography, to look at different stages and phases in your life, to see how you have evolved, whether it was from some internal impetus, some spark of your soul in a sense, that led you to start thinking differently or exploring different interests, changing certain beliefs, or things in your environment. So maybe living in a different country, encountering different cultures, going into a different workplace or school environment. All of those could be some catalyst for our personal transformation. When we're very young, we're very open in a sense to absorb influences. So our sense of self is more dependent upon the external and less solid from within. As we grow older, as we gain more maturity and have a more stable sense of self or self-confidence, we can start to shape our own identity more and are maybe not so easily influenced by the external factors, maybe not as dependent on seeking validation from others, on conformity or fitting in with a group or belonging. So you can notice that perhaps in your own life, as you've grown in maturity, you start to think for yourself more about who you choose to be, what's your own unique identity, what qualities or characteristics are most valuable and important to you. You also may find that you are less inclined to judge others. So as you're okay with who you are and content with your own identity, you don't have as much inclination to compare yourself to others, and you're probably less inclined to try to judge or condemn other people for who they are or how they choose to live their life. You can observe other people and compare their values to yours, but you don't have to impose your values or your way of being on everyone else. It's okay for this world to have a wide variety of people, a wide variety of life paths, a variety of beliefs, of values, etc. I hope that this discussion has created some curiosity for you or encouraged you in some way to reflect on your life path, in particular your childhood, and what were some of the environmental and cultural influences that shaped you as you were growing up. Were you very much inclined to embrace all of those external influences? Was there any time where you felt inclined to really reject or rebel against them, to feel in some way a clash between yourself and your environment, where your environment was trying to impose something that didn't really fit who you were or what you naturally were inspired to express? Either of those could be significant parts of your journey, and perhaps both of those are significant aspects of your path. In some areas of our life, we may very much embrace certain influences from our culture and environment, while at the same time there may also be aspects of those environments or cultures that we don't connect with, that we kind of push aside and reject, you could say, or rebel against, or just detach from as we go forward in our life. For those that are interested in exploring more topics related to personal development, to spirituality, and different components of holistic health, I invite you to view my website, phinsights.com, phinsights.com. For now, I wish everyone a wonderful day. Namaste.